Now, as you probably all know, I've known Sharina probably for about 20 years, but worked closely with her for about 8 years. And all the time on air, where she's giving out, advice and all sorts of little bits and pieces of her past life and how the whole psychic thing came about. It was only ever sort of intimated at. And now that Sharina has been asked by a book company to put pen to paper, and she is sharing her story, that one of the pieces, she shared with me, I just found so fascinating, and I thought, Sharina, you really have to share this with the listeners, because it sort of explains a lot, but it also gives people a huge hope that there is something more out there, particularly after we leave our mortal coil.
Absolutely.
So I hope you don't mind. I mean, I know this is it really is incredibly personal for her. So I just want to go through some of the book, and I'll ask you little bits and pieces. And this is, do we want to know this? Well, I won't say the year, but you were 10 years old in a school auditorium change room. This is part of the book. I was about to be killed by the monster who took me. The brutal attack had seemed to go on forever. Blood was running down my skinny arms and legs. The pain in my stomach, I remember, was excruciating. Thoughts were going through my mind, is this really happening? Where is my mother? Why has everyone abandoned me? Please, Mummy, someone come and save me. Please help me. Someone help me. Now, just explain a little bit more of that. You were abducted at a very, very young age by someone who ended up being convicted for actually killing. I mean, you're incredibly lucky. But tell us a bit about that.
Well, I'd actually was with my brothers and with my brother and a couple of his mates, and we were playing basketball at a high school, and I was 10 and they were 8, and we actually were going to get shown these rabbits off this man that was there, and it was very stupid, but I don't know why I believed it, but I was a bit of a daredevil, a bit of a, believed in people, and he had the keys to the high school, so we actually went into the high school auditorium, and then we actually went into like the little room, which is the toilet room, and there was the dressing room, and he asked us all to face the wall, and after when we were all facing the wall, he was getting undressed, and then we turned. More of that happened before. It was actually before I went in first, and I knew what was going on. He was undressing.
And at 10 years old, you had a real feeling that...
Yes, I started, and I couldn't get past him, but I wanted to run then. But then he brought the boys in. It must have been a really large toilet that was there, because we were all in there. There was 4 of us all together, or 5. And they were giggling, really giggling. And I was trying to say, I saw his penis. I was trying to say things like that, and he was that strong, and as we all turned around, I just screamed the place down, and he just grabbed me and punched me and punched me and punched me down, and they ran for their life. And it was quite lucky that later on you'll find out in the story that one of the boys lived right next to the next to the auditorium of the school, so it wasn't too far. I wasn't very far because it was the high school I actually ended up going to as well.
I'll just go on with a bit of this. I had begged for my life so many times, but this had made the monster angrier, kicking me harder, bash and rip me longer. I had grabbed his dirty blonde hair and scratched his face trying to escape, but he had punched me down till I couldn't breathe, till I could hardly stand up. I already thought I had died. The monster didn't want me to tell. He kept saying, "You can't leave, you will tell." There was no escape, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide in this dirty, grubby change room upstairs in the auditorium. He had the large a boulder in his hand. Does it sound like a rock? He had a rock in his hand. He'd been threatening all along as I lay there frozen with fear, wondering, would death be painful? All hope was gone. I'd given up. I was broken, like I was witnessing this had already happened. The monster was big and strong. All I could do was sob silently and lay broken on the floor. It was then I saw a man made of light. So tell me about that.
No words could ever describe it. It was up in the left corner, and right there, it was like, at first I thought it was the sun coming through, because it was the colour of sun and electricity at the same time. And then a shape was going, and it was almost like, you talk about people that have had out-of-body experiences, and I have had those in my life many times, But this was different than this. This was almost as though you weren't aware of anything going on, but just in awe of this being, whether that was God, whether it was angels, it was something really. It was like the person was inside the flame. That's the only way I could, like a cloud, was just up like that in the corner, and inside was this gold made out of the light. If that makes sense, he's in the light, but he was shaped like a light.
Light was emanating from.
It was like a shadow, but you could see his face, and it was the most amazing experience I've ever experienced in my entire life.
But it didn't hurt your eyes? It was like a bright...
No. I just knew when I thought at the time, and I got the words in my head, and it was like something like, you're going to be okay. You will be okay.
Yeah, it's got it. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry for cutting in. I thought I was floating. I remember sort of being in a hypnosis or out of my body experience. I could feel the pain.
It was even deeper than that experience.
I couldn't feel the pain. This calming effect came over me for a few seconds. The man looked like he was made of electricity, but I remember his eyes were like stars that almost twinkled, sparkling in the sky, like diamonds from the sky, and the kindness in them was dreamy-like. That's very important.
Yes, it was like, even though you couldn't see blue eyes, they were blue, even though they were gold. I can't explain that the way I'm saying that, but I've never ever experienced anything like it, and I sort of forgot where I was, and it was just like I was just in this. I was so exhausted and left for dead, and it was just. It was just, I'm wanting my mummy so much. I was screaming out, "Where are you, mummy?"
No, bear in mind, you were 10 years old when this happened. I had for that split second, I remember feeling warmth and love like I'd never felt. I also heard silent words he said to me, but I heard them in my head. You will be okay. So that was actually, I'll just go on. I know without any doubt in my life that this was the presence of something greater than anything we have ever heard about, God, or at least one of God's angels. The man of light was the most beautiful being I'd ever seen in my life, and that memory stayed in my mind all of my life. I remember thinking my life would never be the same again. It was then I heard the police sirens. Obviously someone had gone and reported what was going on.
They actually came, and I could hear the sirens and the police, the neighbours, and that they smashed all the glass doors down in the auditorium, and that's when he threw me down the flight of stairs. And
Monster threw me down the flight of stairs, and I ran. And he ran for his life. Unfortunately, they didn't catch him, and he did have a history and was actually charged with a couple of other serious crimes.
Yes, serious crimes, yes.
And that was the beginning of probably something very special that happened to you. So you've been able to pass on sort of your gift to
I've never really told
people.
that story to media or anyone before, but I so often get asked about how do I know, I don't think I'm a psychic or whatever. I think it's just a knowing that happens, and when I'm talking to people, sure, I get predictions and things like that, but I don't really look for it. And I think I just wanted to help people to know that, because a lot of people, I think we're going through a lot at the moment in the world, and I think that was just a nice thing to
Oh, look, totally. I mean, I nearly had to twist your arm with this, because I have known you for a long time. We've been very close friends for at least 8 years when we started working together.
Yes.
And I've only heard you mention little fragments of this. I'd never heard of it put into a big picture, and I must say, reading it, it's actually quite emotional. I've sort of started misting up, but it really is such a beautiful story, particularly being in such a dire circumstance.
Nobody believed me in the end.
Having a comfort come along.
Well, no one believed me for many years after that, because they thought it was hallucinations, it was a child talking, but I never forgot that, and I've had so many more experiences ever since. I mean, beautiful little experiences, and I think that you don't need to necessarily run out and pick up a psychic. I think just look for the messages that are around yourself, because they're there. A special song will come out there, and know that you're in comfort, and when I can talk about that in another experience when I actually saw, I think I got a piece of heaven as well, so I'll tell you all about that in another podcast.
Okay. Thank you for that, Sharina.
Thanks very much
for watching.